Hey, this is Erik. Um, I'm a counselor, help people with anxiety, addiction recovery, family dysfunction, a number of things. Here's kind of a personal story. I think it's appropriate. It'll be under the kind of how to deal with anxiety and stress. So I took up knitting, the knitting of sweaters and socks and stuff, over 10 years ago, we'll say. And I never really thought I'd ever knit. I was in the waiting room seeing a client, and the guy actually was a guy knitting, and it's like, wow, you knit? He says, sure. I was thinking it's a gender thing. So every knitter I've ever talked to said it's really relaxing. They do it because you get a benefit of all that, but it's a relaxing thing to do. I'm not sure if it has to do with, wringing of hands, the hand movement. We do know that on our brain, a lot of the brain is mapped out for our hands. Yeah, hands, if you have a hand injury, God forbid, but you would have a lot of extra pain, which you could work through. But that pain is because there's such a large mapping, I think, on the furunculus. So you can see that. So that movement back and forth, and then giving your brain something to do, just follow a pattern. And the pattern, it works out. It kind of, like cables. And here's a funny story. I was down in Seattle at a place called the Pike Street Market. It's kind of like our Fisherman's Wharf. I'm with the family, and I go into all these shops, and it's like, oh, a yarn shop. There's nothing there, and I leave. Little did I realize a month later I'd be really kind of frequenting yarn shops, making jokes about a needle exchange program that I felt like I was kind of addicted to knitting. It was just so fun. There was a kind woman on the peninsula of Washington State who had a knit store. It was my first one I went into. In fact, I'll back up a little bit. I learned to knit through the internet. I bought some cheap red yarn. It was cheap. And some plastic needles. And it's kind of like I'm pushing it through. I couldn't do it. It's like this. Who can do this? Who can do this? This is ridiculous. It took me about 24 hours. It was wild. It would be better to have learned in person, but it is what it is. And once I got it, it's like, oh my gosh, this is so much easier. I was just wrapping things too tight, and that's why they call it tight knitter. So I'm on vacation. We're driving back from a family reunion. And, oh look, in the little town of Allen, like maybe 5 to 10 things there to do. It's on this beautiful water in the Hood Canal. I go in. I don't think anybody went in with me. And I said I would be a beginning knitter. She buys me a yarn. She doesn't buy it. She says, here, I'd recommend this. It was called Yarbo. It was from Sweden. Well, I'm half Swedish. That kind of works. And it's self-striping, which I'll later, and then an 8 needle size, a circular, and I'm going to make a hat. And you just knit around and around and around and around. Well, once I learned to do that, it's like, this is so cool. Why? Because this was a multicolored yarn that's self-striping. And when you go around, it was making these complex patterns and little white stars. And it's looked like, that's your first project? It is. And talk about a lot of joy you get from something so simple. So that sold me. And if I were ever to teach anybody to knit, that's what I would do. Because you got a lot of return on your reward. Okay. So now I'm a knitter. I buy yarn. I look at things at yarn festivals. And I then took one class because I never really had a class. Oh, another fun thing, story is if you're a male knitter, you get a lot of attention. Not that I need more attention, but oh wow, the man walks into this door. And so I'm trying to finish this hat, a beanie, and there's a way to do it where you join stitches and then they just start decreasing stitches. And she says, well, where's your pattern? I said, well, I actually don't have one. I know. She said, oh, you're a man. Yeah, you wouldn't be wanting to follow directions anyway or ask for directions. That I thought was funny. I just thought it was funny. There's something to be said about just follow the directions and it kind of works out. And there's something about that. Just follow the directions. And you go, well, how is it going to make these cables? How is it going to do this? Just follow the directions and it works out. It somehow does, it works. Someone else years earlier did the pattern. And so basically everything is a knit stitch or a purl stitch. There's a few other things you learn, and it's important to be with a group, but you just follow it and it somehow works. So my wife, I don't think she's a knitter. It would be great if she ever wanted to, but that's her thing. But we go to yarn stores and look and look. There was something just very enjoyable about seeing all the colors, feeling the textures. Then we decided we'd go to a yarn festival or a fiber festival, which is funny to say. My mother at the time says, a fiber festival? What are you talking about? I was picturing all these little Sandy cans in a row. No, not that fiber. A fiber where you're actually, with llama and alpaca. So when we went, it was like amazing. We stayed till 10 o'clock at night. We saw a slideshow of knitters from Peru. They had llamas, at the one out here in Monroe, Evergreen State Fairgrounds. You'll see llamas walking by or alpaca. People bring their animals. There's music sometimes. But the vendors come. And it's just, I don't need any more yarn. I have plenty. I have boxes of it. They call it a stash. That's kind of funny. But there are worse problems to have. And I don't consider this a problem. So, to my story, I've picked up the ability to now make a sweater. So I'm making a sweater for a dear friend. And in the process, you take something from a skein and you turn it into a ball of yarn so that it's easier to knit from. And it brings back memories of my grandmother, who was a crocheter, and she would say, oh, Erik, can you hold your hands out like this? And then she would roll that. And that is really a nice way to do it. And then she'd just roll it herself. But they have these little devices you can turn. And so my story is going to be about that. I had problems. Well, I didn't have any problems. I was just going slow and cranking it. And then I had this out, well, I will move it from this desk drawer to the handle of a door so that it's like this. Well, it got tangled. I've been through many, many, many tangles. Not many, but enough tangles to go, oh boy, this is not going the right direction. It's almost as if the yarn has thinking for itself and it starts to clump up. And it's like, in theory, it can't have tied itself in the knots because I didn't tie anything in knots. I didn't loop things. But what happens is it just feels like it has. And the whole thing with yarn is really fascinating. I took up spinning wool. And in spinning wool, you have this roving that's so easy. It's like cotton, you just pull it and it just, but if you twist it, guess what? It becomes really tight. Really tight and really strong. And there's little scale on the fiber, and it's what makes it grab. It's like little hooks. And the rougher, the coarser the hair, the more it doesn't give. And if it's really tight, or sorry, really low scale, then it can. But if you twist it, there's something. I mean, it's kind of wild, because as I had gotten this tangled mess, the reason it was tangled is because that's what yarn does. That's what makes it work. It makes it work better when there is some scale, so that it kind of holds together. And if you wash it in hot water, it felts. It becomes like a sheet of fabric. And if there's not a lot of scale left, because superwash, they took it off, they process it, it washes without felting, but those stitches are kind of looser. So anyway, the principle is, when you get things stuck, you just don't panic. You accept that now I have a tangled thing to undo, and you kind of just shake it to try to keep it loose, trying to pull and stuff. You don't pull because it's just going to tighten, but you just keep it loose, and it works. It takes time. So that little shortcut took me, I feel like 30 minutes. It was 30 minutes of untangling, but it's part of the process. Very similar to life. Life sometimes goes really smoothly, and then there's times we get a little bit tangled up. The principles when things get tangled up is stay loose. Don't get uptight about these things. Realize it's going to be a process. And when you see, the tangled mess, it's kind of a puzzle. You realize, okay, what strand should I move where, and how shall I do this to kind of work with it? But you have to stay relaxed. I had the night before did a brain print from EEG, and strangely enough, I got a perfect score. Not perfect, that's really bad. So don't say that. What I got is, when I was doing the test, I had no mistakes. And I've never done that. It's not like I was trying to do that. In the middle of it, I thought, this is bizarre. Like, everybody gets mistakes. Everybody has a thing where you push it. But what it's doing is it's measuring your brain under stress. It's like, well, I'm just going to roll with it. And sure enough, I got through. I'll do another video on my EEG training, but it was wild. It was just really wild. So I had that experience, and then I thought, well, I'm already hooked up for a brain print. Why not just give myself a session? So it put me in a good state. Slept very well. Then the next morning, I had all this energy, and I thought, well, I'll wind some yarn into balls. And I noticed that I was praying the Jesus prayer a lot. The goal with this experience of making this sweater is, I want to pray. And for those that aren't familiar with the Jesus prayer, it's from my faith tradition, which is Christianity, and you can look it up online. It's, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. And I was just praying that, just knowing the process. I was mindful of time because I did have a client to get to, but it's like, well, the question is, could I put down the mess? My obsessive mind wants to fix the mess. It would have been like lingering to me. I might have even brought the mess to work to make sure I could work on it. It feels, but maybe not that compulsive that I could leave the mess. But no, I got it all done. And you'll see the process of that. I'll show videos here. So when life starts to get tangled, I would say be patient, forbearing. Don't tighten up, but keep things loose. And you just keep on doing this. It will eventually. That's what I did know is I've never had to just cut things. I have this kind of feeling like you just never cut in yarn and knitting, and we don't tie knots as a rule. So I just worked with it, and it got done. So I'm going to do things not by shortcuts. I'm going to enjoy the process. Another thing on knitting, this is interesting, is there was a dear friend who's now departed this life, but her name is Pat, and she really taught me a lot about knitting. She was at my church, and I would say maybe I'm kind of a tight knitter. And she said, Erik, here, give me your work. And she just knitted her all. And then when I handed it back, it was so loose. It's like, wow. And she says, that's one way to teach people how much tension there should be. Because that's the thing. Tight knitters often knit because of the stress. And so learning to stay loose, the very process of trying to do something that loosens you up, will actually help you become more loose and relaxed. That's why they jokingly say if you're knitting socks, and if you're going through a hard time, knit them at the same time, which you can do. But if you do one under normal circumstances and going through a stressful time, your socks will be uneven. No, just a little bit of tension. It's like, will they both fit? So on the sock note, I will share that I did knit some socks for my wife. They were a little bit too tiny. They were just too tiny, and I could have measured better, did some calculations. And Pat says, just rip them out. They call it ribbit. Just rip it out. Just go and just wind it into a ball. All that. She could see the look on my face that, like, really? Well, what are you going to do with purple socks that don't fit your wife? Are you going to go around like Cinderella and say, hey, did these socks fit you? You know, fine. So they would fit someone, but no one I knew. And I'm not going to ask people their foot size, you know. But anyway, she says, well, Erik, why do you knit? I said, well, it's fun. She says, well, why would you be distraught to undo something just to re-knit it? So I re-knitted those socks and in the appropriate size, and that was really, really cool. It taught me that to ask myself the question, why am I doing this? So say like one's having challenges in their spiritual life, like things are really, really hard, but if we go, but wait a minute, why am I on this journey in life? It's to find God and to connect with his love and to live a life that's pleasing to him. Well, then maybe all the struggles, all the tangles, all the messed up stuff in our life is part of that. That's actually why we're here. And how would I ever learn patience if I never go through a difficult time? This helps transform anxiety. It really does transform it, because once you realize that there's a good reason for things, and there's no meaninglessness except in a few things in life. But yeah, our calling is to be, in my experience, is connected with God. And in doing so, we find peace, we find joy, we find meaning to our suffering. And we even find, I guess, spiritual illustrations in even things like knitting. So, well, you take care and you have a great day. I had this thought, the bag is the church, and we're going to unravel at times, but better to pray in the church and stay connected to Christ in the church. But there are times when we hop out of the church and look what happens. It's all over the place, and it doesn't really work well, as you can see. The other principle is when I spin it too fast, that's when it's going to hop out of the church. So slowing down is key. Yeah, just slower down. I spend a lot of time trying to untangle things.